close to, if not below freezing here. Elsewhere, again, temperatures close to freezing, perhaps a patchy frost where skies remain clear to start Monday morning. But a lot of cloud across England and Wales, some showery outbreaks of rain. This weather system here pushes southwards through the day, behind it turning much colder. Wintry showers, sleet and snow across Scotland, falling to some lower levels, leading to icy conditions in places. Sunny spells too, and here temperatures dropping away, falling to 1 or 2 Celsius across parts of Scotland. Perhaps highs just ahead of the frontal system of 9 or 10 degrees across the far south. Into the evening time, the weather front will start to slow down across parts of Wales, the Midlands, into southern England, and perhaps some longer spells of rain redeveloping here, some sleet and snow perhaps too as we move into the early hours of Tuesday. Elsewhere, we'll generally see clearing skies, snow showers around coastal areas, temperatures -5 to possibly near -10 Celsius across Scotland to start Tuesday morning. But a sunny start here, cloud with outbreaks of rain, sleet and perhaps some snow across southern counties of England as well, one to watch over the next 24 hours or so. But the day ahead, plenty of sunny spells and wintry showers further north. That stays similar over the next few days, temperatures remaining below average. See you again soon.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. And as always, we've plenty coming up. The budget's just a fortnight away. What do you most fear? What do you most hope for? Plus farmers and food shortages and prices, rail fares rising. Your thoughts, as always, please, on that or anything else that's on your mind. GBViews at gbnews.uk or on any of our social media platforms. Stay with me for the next couple of hours. But first, let's get you underway, as always, with a full summary of today's news. Here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Alastair, thank you and good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. This is the latest. The former health secretary wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off everyone, according to leaked messages sent during the COVID pandemic. The latest WhatsApp conversation published in the Sunday Telegraph shows Matt Hancock discussing how to use another strain of the virus to scare the public. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told GB News Mr Hancock's political career is over.
I think the key thing is that he accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts. Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.
Train passengers are being hit by the largest hike in rail fares for more than a decade. And it comes amid record cancellations and strikes. Ticket prices across England and Wales are increasing by an average of 5.9% from today, which could add hundreds of pounds to annual season tickets. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman says the increase is below inflation, but Labour has called it savage. The Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, says the increase isn't fair when it comes to the services currently being provided.
A taxpayer who really doesn't want to pay more for what, frankly, is quite a lousy service. We heard last week, for example, that that the number of cancellations on the day is at the highest it's ever been since records began. So people are quite frankly thinking, yep, it's we're paying more and we're getting less.
Prince Harry has defended his previous use of drugs, saying some of them helped him mentally. During an interview, he spoke to trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, who diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder. In his memoir Spare, Harry admitted taking drugs on a regular basis, saying he used marijuana in 2015 whilst living in the grounds of Kensington Palace. Now, clashes have broken out in Athens between police and demonstrators over a train crash that killed 57 people. University students and railway workers took to the streets to voice their anger over safety standards on the network. More than 350 people were on board the train when it crashed head-on into a freight train last Tuesday. It's the deadliest crash in Greece's history. Its government has vowed to investigate and fix the ailing rail networks. Now, more than 100 nations have completed an historic pact to protect the world's oceans. The legally binding High Seas Treaty aims to put 30% of seas into protected areas by 2030. Very little of the high seas is subject to any protection, with pollution and overfishing posing a growing threat. Environmental groups say the agreement will help reverse marine losses and ensure sustainable development. Notorious prisoner Charles Bronson will make another bid to get out of jail this week in a public parole hearing. He's been behind bars for most of the last 50 years for crimes such as hostage-taking and armed robbery. Proceedings will be live-streamed on Wednesday with a final hearing behind closed doors on Friday. He says he wants to be released to enjoy what's left of his life. The Prince's Foundation, founded by the King, has partnered with luxury fashion brand Chanel to launch an embroidery course for students. 6 university graduates will be selected, receiving bursaries for living costs during the 24-week programme. Held at the King's Highgrove home in Gloucestershire, it aims to equip and prepare aspiring designers. Venues across England and Wales will be open later over the King's coronation weekend in May. Clubs and bars will serve customers for an extra 2 hours between the 5th and the 7th of May. The Home Secretary says it's so that people can have the time to enjoy an extra pint or two. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. And a very good afternoon to all of you. Today we're going to preview the budget, which, believe it or not, is just a fortnight away. The Chancellor's room for manoeuvring what government objectives may be, what do business want, whether they're big businesses or whether they're small, medium enterprises, and terribly importantly, what do you want in that budget and what do you fear most? Do tell me and I'll share the best ideas back with everybody else who's kind enough to be watching and listening, and we may even put a little sheaf of them together and send them off to number 11 Downing Street. You never know. It's never too late to come up with a particularly good idea. Now, the budget is one of those big events that really can make or break governments. The speech on the 15th of March follows PM Key's, which itself increasingly is a bit of a cabaret these days in political terms. And with the UK economy, however, flirting precariously with recession and a general election very close, it makes this spring budget even more interesting. Well, the Sunday Telegraph is pretty optimistic today with our own and their own Liam Halligan talking about celebrating those green shoots. Those of you with a memory will recall Norman Lamont having used that expression himself, and lo and behold, it came true. Liam says he thinks that the weather is beginning to change positively on the economy, and he says the key thing is not to tread on those shoots and kill them off before they have time to take root and really develop and spring into all of the glories that those of us who care about the economy want to happen. There's another think piece in the Sunday Telegraph worth reading that suggests that the UK is wide open for business. And the consensus is that things are a little better for the Chancellor because there has been a little bit of growth despite the proximity of recession. And of course, with taxes that you and I and businesses pay at their highest in decades, that means that the money is flooding in to the Treasury. Cutting borrowing, but not debt. But it does reduce the need to add to that debt. And the Institute for Fiscal Studies, it's independent and it's probably the key organisation that most people, on whatever side of the political divide they are, respect to give an objective appraisal of the state of the economy. They reckon that borrowing will be around £30 billion less than next year than previously feared. But the Office of Budget Responsibility, the official watchdog of what it says, budget responsibility, has also warned that Jeremy Hunt is limited in his headroom to just as little as £9 billion. Not much that you can do with that, you might argue. Well, we'll see. Sunday Times goes big on getting people back to work who've retired. Some of the popular papers are talking about building a bridge back to work. It's estimated, as I was just saying to Arlene Foster, that there are about 5 million people who are economically inactive. Some are students, some are too old to work, some have just decided to call it a day a little earlier. And the idea is to try and get them back into work because there's also about 250,000 vacancies in the economy. And if you're politically interested, then it adds up as well, that if you're economically active, then of course you're paying tax and national insurance and not living on benefits. So for all of us, whether we're taxpayers or just hope that the best happens to the economy, it would be good to build that bridge back to employment. There's also the long-term sick, and it's interesting to see that the government are briefing big on that, even talking about trying to persuade small and medium-sized enterprises to have occupational therapists available within the business. There may be some money and some grants available for that, but basically to spot people who may be inching towards becoming not well, and whether or not there are some of those who've been out of work due to health for a long time, whether they can perhaps be helped back into work. Intriguing that it's an area of agreement between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, so watch that one. Given a certain of income, we carve it up between food and energy, housing, etc. When we do our budget, the Chancellor can vary the level of government income via taxation and, of course, makes choices on what government wants to do and what it does not want to do. The Prime Minister is the First Lord of the Treasury, and he has said that he wants his 5 pledges New Year's to include halving inflation, restoring growth and reducing government debt. Well, a lot of that is already tickling through, so that's probably quite good news for him, but it will provide the background music to whatever Jeremy Hunt does in just a couple of weeks' time. As I say, inflation is falling, but not prices. only the rate at which prices are going up. So as employees, business owners, retirees, as you may be at home, what do you want from the Chancellor? Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or go on to any of our social media outlets and we'll share the best ones back with you and with the Treasury and number 11 Downing Street. Well, all of that in just a moment. But first, I'm delighted to bring you right up to speed with how what's already been a busy week in politics is drawing to a conclusion this weekend. And I'm delighted to say that once again, Olivia Utley is here, GB News political correspondent, sitting here with me live in the studio, having hot-footed it back from Windsor. That was great stuff, wasn't it? Absolutely intriguing down there. So this amuses me slightly because the Sun go with it in a big splash on page 2. Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, on a migrants' call, quotes, "Enough talk, we must stop boats," with a talk, no pun intended, of new laws to block illegals. Her choice of language there. The political pressure on the government, and particularly her, to get this done is massive. All the focus groups, all the opinion polls.
Absolutely huge political pressure. And I think, interestingly, perhaps what's heaped even more pressure on Rishi Sunak to sort this small boats crisis is the fact that Keir Starmer seems to be pretty much sweeping the issue under the rug. I was at his speech yesterday where he laid out his 5 plans to what he would do in government if Labour get in at the next election, and small boats wasn't on there, which was very interesting. And we had Sun journalists and Mail journalists asking questions about that. So
The Mail were asking.
The Mail were asking, yeah.
Interesting. Well, you know, because we were talking about this before we came in, but I just hold that up. That's the front page of the Mail that Olivia is referring to there, and that brings the Prime Minister into the discussion, whereas the Sun is just quoting the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Rishi quotes, "Make no mistake, I'll deport Channel migrants."
Yes, and he sees this as a big area of differentiation between himself and Keir Starmer. That's what MPs are saying. That's what they want him to address. That's an easy way to get his backbenchers on side because, as you say, focus group after focus group shows that this is something that people really care about. And this piece of legislation, which Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak have cooked up, which is going to be put forward on Tuesday, will essentially mean that all asylum seekers who come via small boats, their claims simply won't be considered. They'll be sent back to Rwanda or another safe third country. So it gets around the modern slavery legislation, which we know has essentially acted as a blockade in the immigration process. So you've got people who have come here claiming modern slavery under current law. It's almost impossible to question that claim of modern slavery until they've been held in a waiting area in hotels, etc. And the average time for them to be held there is 424 days, which just shows the extent to which this is blocking up the immigration process for other people who want to come by
so clear
a legal route.
Blue water again, as our mutual friend Mr. Portillo used to refer to. You mentioned the Starmer speech yesterday, but he and his would-be Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, come in for renewed hostility in the newspapers today. Dan Hodges, who has no time for Keir Starmer and is a former Labour person, is particularly brutal. The other one that caught my attention was Camilla Long in the Sunday Times, who said that this episode proves that Sir Keir Starmer is not the Messiah, he's just a silly boy.
Yes, and actually...
Bit naughty, but quite clever and quite fun.
Clever, absolutely. So the same point, actually, that our People's Panel were picking up on this morning, quite possible that Sue Gray wouldn't dream of letting her political opinions interfere with her work in the civil service, but the optics of it are just so bad. And it gives fuel to the fire of someone like Boris Johnson, who says that Sue Gray can't be trusted and her report can't be trusted. So it is beginning to look as though that was a bit of an own goal for Keir Starmer. And if he thought that this would somehow disappear from the headlines or not be picked up on, it does feel as though it's had more political cut-through, as they say, than you might expect.
Sure. Also not going away, and this is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, that even give it a kind of headline flash there, the lockdown files, they refer to it. And this quite extraordinary thing. I mean, I find it slightly offensive and ridiculous that government and policy seem to be conducted via WhatsApp for so long. But for a very senior member of that government, the Health Secretary himself, to talk about frightening the pants off the public by telling them, you better abide by all of the rules, or this new variant in Kent is going to come up and do for you and do for us all. I mean, the language is childish and pathetic. The politics, demeaning.
The politics is very demeaning, and I think what I found most shocking about that is the episode where Matt Hancock talks about when they're going to release the new variant. So essentially, the news that there was a new variant was being kept from us until the moment of most political expediency for Matt Hancock, and he wanted to pick his time when he felt that people were getting complacent to release this news that a new variant was here. And it does feel a little bit as though the people were kind of played as children almost over this whole lockdown period. So I think these stories are going to keep on coming, and it's going to heap pressure on that COVID inquiry, which many people have said shouldn't be dragged out for as long as
Interesting as well, going back to the Labour-Tory thing, we heard just in the news bulletin there that Labour's former Shadow Health Secretary saying that this draws a line under Hancock's political career, which I rather thought had been drawn anyway. But it also emerged from these leaks that he thought COVID was going to relaunch his political career, and was told by close friends that this would project him right up to the very, very top, presumably either leader or Chancellor of the Exchequer or Home Secretary. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth.
Absolutely. And it was quite alarming seeing that right at the beginning of that pandemic, when you think the health secretary might have some other things to think about, he was talking to this close friend about how the crisis might help to propel him up to greater heights. Quite an alarming thing to see, really. So I think it's easy, with all of these comments coming out at the same time, it's easy to sort of forget the overwhelming weight of them, really. But it is, as the former Shadow Health Secretary said, it very much draws a line under Matt Hancock's political career.
Am I being a bit puritanical, or do you, I hope, agree with me, perhaps, that this whole episode has slightly damaged the perception of how we do politics in this country?
I think it definitely has, and I think the politics by WhatsApp must be consigned to the history books soon.
Fascinating stuff. Olivia, always a great pleasure. And again, as I said, congratulations on the People's session down in Windsor. I love that ex-civil servant as well, who had his fourpenneth on Sue Gray. I thought he was absolutely on the money. Have a great what's left of Sunday, and see you again later on. Thank you very much indeed. Olivia Utley there, political correspondent for GB News. Right, let us return to the budget, and to get the discussion underway, I'm delighted to say that joining me now is Helen Thomas. Helen is the CEO of Blonde Money, and is also former advisor to George Osborne, which I must confess I didn't know until we were preparing for this item, because you're very good enough to come on the programme quite often talking about summer savings and tips for people and what have you. So the big picture, there's a little bit of growth, there's falling inflation, there's lower borrowing than feared. The backdrop for Chancellor Jeremy Hunt could be considerably worse than it is.
Yes, which isn't necessarily the best political background that you might want. You either want to really be able to pull all the rabbits from the hat, or you want to, save everybody from some terrible nightmare. And actually, unfortunately, we've been through the terrible nightmare. I mean, what a dreadful last few months, not just the weather, but the cost of living crisis, which has just dragged on and been so painful for everybody. And of course, these energy prices that are still with us. So it's a bit of a strange time to be having this budget. And I think the message is actually going to be steady as she goes, don't frighten the horses.
From the leaked briefings about bridges back into work and what have you, that this may be more of a supply side budget than a demand side budget. There are very few briefings that he's going to put any money back in our pockets, but simply try and find a way, if we're over a certain age, to get back into work.
Well, I think what we'll see is a lot of very detailed policy prescriptions on specific areas where there is a problem. And we have heard for months and months now about this inactivity in a large part of the labour force. People just, unable or unwilling to go back to work. And what can be done about that? And there's been a lot of work done on the Conservative side about this, from what we can hear. So as you say, there may well be some tweaks or changes made. You talked in your preview earlier on that, we might all be getting an occupational health check and even small businesses might be incentivised to be able to provide that for people. But it's not just long-term sickness that's the issue. There are other factors that are why people aren't going to work. It could be to do with childcare and how expensive that is. It could be our pension rules. I'd be fascinated by your viewers, because I bet they've got real first-hand experience of that, which make it just pointless, actually, to return to work because of the huge tax rates and the loss of allowances. There's a lot of little detailed stuff going on, and we know from Rishi Sunak, we've seen this with that Brexit deal. He loves that detail. He wants to go in and solve those problems to try and get everything back on track, which means you do slightly miss the big picture message.
Sure. And the cost of living crisis is very clearly front and centre, what we normally talk about when you're kind enough to come onto the programme, and what a lot of people come to your website to seek advice and guidance on. But again, call me old-fashioned, but the best way of dealing with a cost of living crisis is to put more money in people's pockets and let them make their own choices about how they spend it.
Well, that's the debate that is racking its way through the Conservative Party, of course. You know, you're kind of alluding there to potential for tax cuts, which have, having been thrust massively in the spotlight in October, September last year, were then pulled and yanked back because of the violent market response to the previous Prime Minister and her plans on that front. And I think that debate's still going to rage, and I think there will certainly be some Conservative MPs and possibly even just people in the country who do think the answer is just, look, put more money into our pockets and we can figure out what to do with it.
Sure.
But as with all things, how do you pay for all of this? And that is still hanging over this budget because of what happened at the end of last year. They are unable to escape that.
Well, not long to wait, and perhaps you'll be good enough to come back and reflect on what actually does happen in that. Let's hope there are no pasties, which will bring back headaches from your time when you were working with George. Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money, great to see you again, and thank you very much indeed for your wisdom and your guidance through that. And as I said, the budget's 15th of March, so we'll be talking to a range of people reflecting upon it as and when it does unfold. Helen, thank you very much indeed. Next up, I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme, again with a different sort of hat on this time, but it's the great Sir Anthony Seldon, the renowned political biographer and educator, and there he is. Good to see you, sir, and thank you for breaking into your weekend. I mentioned the bit about modern historian and political biographer, Anthony. Do you think anyone out there, let alone the occupants of number 10 or number 11 Downing Street, know what a fiscal conservative is anymore?
No, not really, Alastair. And I think the interesting thing about this budget, there'll be many interesting things, is it going to be the Chancellor's Jeremy Hunt, who is, you were pointing out, is second Lord of the Treasury, or the first Lord of the Treasury, the Prime Minister? And it's always very interesting where a Prime Minister has been a Chancellor, like Gordon Brown, because, all Prime Ministers stick with what they know best. So in the same way that Theresa May was a Home Secretary Prime Minister and Boris Johnson was a City Hall Prime Minister, so Rishi Sunak is really, at the moment, he needs to move away from it, actually, but he's a Chancellor. So it's going to be fascinating who is taking the big decisions. But look, it's going to be a very cautious budget. Their eyes are on one prize only, and that is winning the general election at the end of next year, and giving away too much now, letting inflation rip is not going to do it. So expect this to be cautious, steady, lots of micro initiatives, but just playing it cool and safe with the eyes on the big prize of a unprecedented in history 6th general election victory.
Do you rate either of them?
I do. I mean, I think that Rishi Sunak, he's learning a lot. He probably needs to listen to some different people. But he is really unbelievably hardworking, up there in the Thatcher class. He's prudent, he's cautious, he's moral. I think he has the makings. The question is, it takes a Prime Minister 3 or 4 years to learn how to do the job, and history would strongly suggest he's going to have 2 years. And Jeremy Hunt, clearly, I mean, goodness, how many chancellors in history have taken over at a more desperate moment? And the way he gripped the reins and just showed that steady aplomb, bringing the economy back from the absolute abyss of Liz Truss's wild dreams and steadied the ship. I mean, you know, that's stuff of history.
Sure. The final quick one, if I may. I was talking to Olivia about the lockdown files and this one, Hancock's plan to frighten the pants off the public, and with policy being discussed, debated and even resolved by WhatsApp. Do you think, as a modern historian and political biographer, this is all pretty demeaning for our politics?
And chair of the National Archive Trust, too, where at Kew, where all our wonderful documents go. I mean, look, I agree with everything Olivia said until the end when she said we've got to move beyond WhatsApp politics. We're not going to do that any more than we can uninvent any other modern innovation that we might not like. But I absolutely agree, it's demeaning. And the way this whole thing has played out over such an incredibly important issue as COVID, where many viewers will have lost loved ones and have hugely strong views about it. I mean, it's really undignified, and you know it matters. I mean, I'm talking as a school leader and a former university leader. We need our politicians. This is where I think Sunak and Hunt do very well. We need them to behave and to be grown-ups. And they are, I think, whether we like their politics or not. But I think this is so demeaning and gives such a terrible example to people who might want to come into politics. Politics should be a very high calling indeed.
Indeed, indeed. Anthony, great to see you, and thank you for breaking into the weekend. Loved you both. Have good what's left of the weekend. I hope you enjoy it. As a mutual friend of ours said to me recently, why would anybody of our generation want to go into public life or let alone politics, given all of this nonsense? But there we are, the thoughts of the great Sir Anthony Seldon. Always a pleasure. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends, with lots more coming up on today's programme. With food inflation and security hitting the country, we'll be finding out what farmers are doing to adapt to that. But first, a quick break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 1:30. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The former Health Secretary wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off the public. That's according to leaked messages sent during the COVID pandemic. The latest WhatsApp conversation, published in the Sunday Telegraph, shows Matt Hancock discussing how to use another strain of the COVID virus to scare the public. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told GB News Mr Hancock's political career is over.
I think the key thing is that he is accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts. Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.
Train passengers are being hit by the largest hike in rail fares for more than a decade, and it comes amid record cancellations and strikes. Regulated ticket prices across England and Wales are increasing by an average of 5.9% from today, which could add hundreds of pounds to annual season tickets. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman says the increase is below inflation, but Labour has called it savage. And clashes have broken out in Athens between police and demonstrators over a train crash that killed 57 people. University students and railway workers took to the streets to voice their anger over safety standards on the rail network. More than 350 people were on board the train when it crashed head-on into a freight train last Tuesday. It's the deadliest train crash in Greece's history. Its government has vowed to investigate and fix the ailing rail networks. TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. You will know a little of this, not least due to our Rural Spotlight, where we try to look at food and farming pretty well in every programme. And we've reported on the fact that food inflation and food security are now at the top of the news agenda. And of course, it is affecting farmers across the United Kingdom. Well, GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been talking to farmers who also have retail interests and are adapting to the future. Here's what he found out from Northern Ireland farmer.
Well, your main costs are coming out of your butters and your milks and your flours and sugars, just right across the board. And unfortunately, in this last 6 months, we've seen a big price rise in everything.
Gareth Corrie explaining the problems around costs in the bakery sector. But Gareth has other business interests, and they're all linked to food production.
Well, we also do beef farming, dairy farming and butcher shops as well. And especially in the beef farming, it's getting very, very tight because of the cost of meal and labour costs and just the actual purchase price of the actual animal. It's very hard to make a living at it.
The food chain is a costly thing. It starts with the ground, the seed, all that have to be bought and then fed. And with rising interest rates, cash flows are being pushed.
It's an ever-growing issue. Do you know, the costs that are going into production, they just keep rising. Now, whether that is electricity, labour being a major one, fuel, fertiliser, all those things, they just keep creeping up. And that's, you know, across the board of food production.
Emily McGowan is the director of Millbank Farm Shop, and most of its produce is from her family's farm. She says direct retail lessens the risks and gives additional income.
Well, it's a tricky market. You know, you're relying on the weather, you're relying on the land, and it's, you know, that's farming. Now we have a farm shop now, so we're able to, you know, spread that risk and be able to supply the shop, not only other wholesalers.
As with most of the UK, produce prices to the farm gate are being kept low, and farms are now cutting back on larger retail productions.
As a business, we are slowing down and more or less stopping large-scale vegetable production because it's just not viable, unfortunately, anymore for us.
The importation of food is a risk, and will future generations take the gamble?
It's a very volatile market for supermarkets. Are the Spanish farmers going to plant the tomatoes and the peppers next year if they're not getting the money for the produce? Well, I'm a young farmer, and there are many other young farmers coming into the industry, which is very exciting for the industry, that there's a future. But there is only going to be a future if farmers get the right money for what we are producing.
Dougie Biddy, GB News.
And I'm delighted to say that Dougie can join me live now from Northern Ireland to reflect just a little further on what, if I may say so, was a fantastic package and a fantastic report. Does the Windsor framework or the old protocol have any impact upon this? I mean, input costs, presumably it does matter.
Well, it does, and farming in Northern Ireland has been right in the middle of that storm, of course, because the red lanes that we would be held in still affects us with livestock, if you like, going across the Irish Sea, and we are held inside EU regulations. And as I was saying yesterday, I spent a bit of time in Holland over the last couple of weeks, and of course they are being pushed with methane and to 3,000 farms looking at closing, and they're going to try and do the same thing here in the Republic of Ireland, and that may well come to Northern Ireland. And if you take it that the Irish dairy sector is worth about £6.8 billion per year, it is quite a concern for this industry. But the McGowan family and the Corrie family, very, very highly respected inside Northern Ireland. And Emily McGowan, they're saying that, well, they're really not going to be supplying supermarkets anymore, Alastair. They're going to continue with their retail trade and wholesale trade. And that says a lot of how they're not being paid at the farm gate. And if we look at the US Department of Agriculture, just released their projections for this year for US dairy products. People saying this is part of Brexit. No, well, US isn't part of that. And they are saying that the US dairy sector will lose 18.2% of its income this year. That's about $30.5 billion. That is some hit. And when you take that Holland is the next biggest producer of agriculture, the both of those together will cause a shortage within 2024-25 in dairy products, because of course right across the UK the dairies are now paying farmers in this last month about 5 pence a litre less, which means they will put less on their land and produce less milk that to go into our foods.
And I would just say via you, and I know you won't contradict me for a moment, to anyone listening to us on radio or watching us on television, if you've never been to a farmer's market, you have missed out. They are a wonderful experience and the produce is just brilliant. And you can support men and women who are doing their very best for all of us. Dougie, thanks for sharing that with us from Northern Ireland. Dougie Beattie there, our Northern Ireland reporter. Thank you very much indeed. You take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed. And you are watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including more on British farming, as British growers urge the government to put warm words into action and invest in the horticulture sector. I'll be asking what can be done precisely to tackle the fruit and vegetable shortage. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning colder as we move into next week, the increased risk of frost and ice and some snow in the forecast too. Looking at the bigger picture, we can see, yes, it's been relatively cold this weekend for many parts, but from Monday onwards, these darker blues, the colder air filters southwards as we head through the beginning of next week, an increasing risk of snow. And that's also evident as we go through the next 24 hours. So through the rest of Sunday, it is a cloudy picture out there. We do see some showers across parts of Wales up into Northern Ireland and Scotland, perhaps a little bit wintry over the highest ground. Temperatures overall on the chilly side, 5 to 9 Celsius. So a lot of cloud around. Generally light winds, but starting to come down from the north. Into the evening time, we see an increased risk of snow developing across parts of Aberdeenshire up into Shetland. Stronger winds developing too. So an increased risk of ice here as we move into the early hours. Met Office warnings in force for snow and ice as we move through into Monday morning. Generally across England and Wales, though, temperatures low single figures. A lot of cloud around to start Monday morning with some showers from the word go. We do have a weather front sinking south. It's this band of weak rain here. Behind it, much colder air filtering in. Turning brighter, though, with sunny spells and wintry showers. Some snow starting to accumulate to relatively low levels across parts of Scotland as this weather system sinks south, breaks up into showers across the Midlands. In the far south, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius, but temperatures falling as the day goes on. Struggling to get much above freezing in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland with frequent snow showers, which continues into Monday evening as well. Some frontal linkage across southern parts of Wales, southwest England could see the return of some rain and hill snow later on in the evening. But overall, it looks like over the next few days, it stays rather cloudy in the south, snow showers in the north, staying very cold, particularly at night. See you again soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Hello again, welcome back, and you are watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Thank you also for getting in touch, which you have been doing in profusion on our big topic of the day, and that is the Chancellor's forthcoming budget in just about a fortnight's time. Roger gets us underway by saying, I implore you to implore Hunt not to raise fuel duty on the 15th. Well picked up on that. It's been briefed in the newspapers that the Treasury are saying to him, yes, you must do it. And one of the reasons that they're saying he should do it is because they say it would yield enough for him to give the nurses a decent pay rise, their language, not mine, and therefore buy a little industrial peace in the National Health Service. But of course it would, as you imply, be inflationary and not at all popular with those who drive using petrol or diesel. Harry joins the debate and cuts to the chase. The Chancellor should resign all that he has done is tax the poor. Cutting the taxes would be getting the economy moving, he says. Morgan says to keep order, people in work, or to tempt them back into work, the answer is simple. Those who've paid full national insurance to reach the full government pension age over the required years should cease to pay it after that. Do keep your views coming in and we'll share the best back with you. The other thought I had on that is that one of the best ways to getting people back into work is to let them keep more of what they earn, which of course would mean reducing not only national insurance but also income tax. It's just worth the thought. I throw it out there, but do give us your thoughts as well. We always love hearing from you. Now, the UK is likely to be grappling with a shortage of fruit and vegetables for quite some time. It's prompted producers to call for a horticultural growth strategy. Now, in response, the National Farmers Union has published a 10-point plan on just how to boost the production of fresh British produce. The NFU says that the strategy, if backed by the government, could minimise future supply chain disruption. And I'm delighted to say that joining me now is the chair of the NFU's Horticulture and Potatoes Board, Martin Emmett, and there he is. Martin, great to see you and thank you very much indeed. Do the government get this? Because I know you had a big conference recently and you had the Environment Secretary there, you also had the Farms Ministers there, and I do believe, a friend of mine told me, you had the leader of the opposition as well, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Alastair, and thank you for having me on the programme. And the government do get it in such that they published a food strategy back in June last year. And that food strategy realised that we needed to develop our resilience and that we needed to actually grow more food in the UK. So they talked about having a growth plan for the sector, but as yet we've not seen very much evidence of that. So that's why, as the NFU, we've actually prepared this 10-point plan. Yeah. It covers not just fresh produce, but also ornamental plants and garden plants as well. So the whole of horticulture, whole of production horticulture. And we do hope they are now going to start to listen.
I'm delighted, and if you've been kind enough to see this programme or talk to any of your chums who have, I've been echoing that it is an industry. It isn't just fruit and veg. It's horticulture right across the piece. NFU's also briefing, and it's picked up in the broadsheets today, that the supermarkets have not played a blinder over this. And Dougie Beattie, our Northern Ireland reporter, was just saying that in Northern Ireland, an awful lot of farmers there are seeking to cut out the supermarkets. They're going direct to the consumer, farmers' markets, their own retail outlets and what have you. And what the NFU is saying this morning is that it's price wars between the supermarkets that have really hurt as well, and they're getting silly and finicky about specification of the very, very precise size of an apple or whatever it might be, and if it doesn't fit that perfectly, then they won't buy. They need to get their act together as well, don't they?
They do. I mean, to be fair, British supermarkets are doing a very good job at delivering very high quality produce at the lowest possible prices to UK customers. But this shortage that we now have, for example, in salads, we were predicting. And obviously there's a different response that we're seeing in Europe compared to what we're seeing here in the UK. So the issue really from the industry's point of view is that what we need is, yes, we need long-term contracts, but we need the flexibility in them that growers know and can be confident they get a fair return. Because without that confidence that they're going to get a fair return, that they can renegotiate when, for example, we get unexpected cross-price inflation, without that confidence, we're not going to be making the level of investment that we need. And we need to be really clear. We do need to grow more food in this country. With climate change, with the shortages of water that's happening worldwide, and with the resilience of the British climate, this is where we should be growing a lot more of our food.
Does that mean that you need more glass and more plastic growing areas? Because they are very costly to run, aren't they, with the energy prices at what they are?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. In the government's food strategy, they put a lot of focus on what they're calling industrial farming, by which I think they meant sort of vertical urban farms. But actually, we need to look at the whole range of production in the UK. Yes, there is going to be a benefit from having more greenhouses and polythene tunnels. And yes, they are expensive to run, but they can be very efficient in terms of water use. And also, we need to understand we're getting to a new generation of the industry now, where we're using a lot more renewable energies, where we're using technologies like combined heat and power, which gives us the most efficient use of gas. So it doesn't just generate electricity, which can go onto the national grid, but it also can heat our greenhouses. So yes, there is cost, but actually it's a cost worth paying.
Absolutely, and it's an industry worth celebrating, which I always seek to do on this programme, and we at GB News do as well. Martin, first time we've conversed. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Hope you'll keep in touch with us. Best of luck with the government and your 10-point plan. Let's get cracking on it and sort out a whole number of problems all in one go. Martin Emmett there, the National Farmers Union Horticulture and Potatoes Board, joining me for the first time. Always a pleasure to talk to frontline farmers as well as the NFU itself. Now, Formula One is back. And the Dutchman, Max Verstappen, has put down a very clear early marker of his intention to retain the Drivers' World Championship. No recovery, however, yet in form for Mercedes, with both drivers talking down the team's prospects and their owns. So, if you are a Brit and like a bit of patriotism, which Red Bull say they get punished for by the British audience because they've never employed a British driver, maybe Aston Martin is one to watch this season. Fernando Alonso, their blast from the past driver, raised a few eyebrows during practice, putting in some quite truly extraordinary timings. And I'm delighted to say that joining me once again now is PA's brilliant Formula One correspondent, Philip Duncan. And there he is, a couple of hours away from the start of the race in Bahrain. So, Aston Martin, do you reckon it's one to watch?
I think they're certainly one to watch, Alastair, that's for sure. I mean, they've turned up here and they've sort of turned the form book on its head, as it were. In fairness to last season, where they were struggling, or the last 2 years where they've been back in Formula One and really struggled. But they've turned a corner over the winter. They've got Fernando Alonso there, as you say, the double world champion, a young man at the age of 41, but he's still able to do the business. And certainly with that machinery, the car, which has improved, as we say, from last year's version, that he's certainly in the mix. He starts fifth today, and he certainly will be in contention for a podium, which is great news for the sport. It's great that we've got another team in there amongst the top three. Obviously, we've got Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. To have Aston Martin there too is great.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's a great British brand, not unlike Bentley in the touring car area of activity as well. So I genuinely wish them well. Do you think that Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris will get ticked off by Toto Wolff and the backers of Mercedes for having so talked down the team's prospects and their own?
Yeah, it's a bit of a disaster for Mercedes, isn't it, Alastair? I mean, obviously they had a very difficult year last year, as we know. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, the man who's used to winning, didn't win one race at all last season, which is the first time that's ever happened to him in his career. So he would have liked to have turned up here in Bahrain with a car, with a machine that's able to take him to that record 8th World Championship. But as you say, it doesn't look as though he's got the machinery there to be able to do it. He said here on Friday that the car isn't up to scratch, that it's the wrong concept, that they've fallen behind. And Toto Wolff, the team principal, echoed those sentiments last night and basically said he's going to throw this season's car in the bin and start again, which is obviously terrible news for Lewis Hamilton, his teammate George Russell, ahead of this new season. So, yeah, troubling times again for Hamilton and for his Mercedes team, even before we've had one race.
I meant George, not Lando. My apologies, and thank you for that delicate correction. I'm grateful. Mercedes looking a little bit like Ferrari, once great, but now in the wilderness.
Yeah, as you say, once great, but it's been the best part of 16 years since they last won a Drivers' World Championship. 2007 was when they last won a driver's title with Kimi Räikkönen, the Finnish driver. They were there or thereabouts last year, but they had a number of strategical and driver errors and mechanical mistakes that really plagued their season. You know, they start in the second row today with their drivers Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, so they're there. I mean, they could certainly be in the mix, but they're going to be relying on Red Bull to have some problems in today's race. Max Verstappen looks really out of in a class of his own here this weekend, which is rather ominous given how he dominated last season, winning 15 of the 22 races and winning his second championship. So he's obviously the favourite to take his third title going into today's race.
Philip, it's always a pleasure, genuinely. Thank you very much indeed for fitting us into what I know is a tremendously busy day for you, not only with the race on, but the first of the season. The Press Association's Formula One correspondent, the great Philip Duncan there, sharing his thoughts on Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull and Aston Martin. A great British team. We wish them well. And that race starts in a couple of hours' time. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends, with lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon. We'll be looking forward once again to the budget in a couple of weeks' time and finding out the hopes and fears of business. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning colder as we move into next week, the increased risk of frost and ice and some snow in the forecast too. Looking at the bigger picture, we can see, yes, it's been relatively cold this weekend for many parts, but from Monday onwards, these darker blues, the colder air filters southwards as we head through the beginning of next week, an increasing risk of snow. And that's also evident as we go through the next 24 hours. So through the rest of Sunday, it is a cloudy picture out there. We do see some showers across parts of Wales, up into Northern Ireland and Scotland, perhaps a little bit wintry over the highest ground. Temperatures overall on the chilly side, 5 to 9 Celsius. So a lot of cloud around. Generally light winds, but starting to come down from the north. Into the evening time, we see an increased risk of snow developing across parts of Aberdeenshire up into Shetland. Stronger winds developing too. So an increased risk of ice here as we move into the early hours. Met Office warnings in force for snow and ice as we move through into Monday morning. Generally across England and Wales, though, temperatures low single figures. A lot of cloud around to start Monday morning with some showers from the word go. We do have a weather front sinking south. It's this band of weak rain here. Behind it, much colder air filtering in. Turning brighter, though, with sunny spells and wintry showers. Some snow starting to accumulate to relatively low levels across parts of Scotland as this weather system sinks south, breaks up into showers across the Midlands. In the far south, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius, but temperatures falling as the day goes on. Struggling to get much above freezing in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland with frequent snow showers, which continues into Monday evening as well. Some frontal linkage across southern parts of Wales, southwest England could see the return of some rain and hill snow later on in the evening. But overall, it looks like over the next few days, it stays rather cloudy in the south, snow showers in the north, staying very cold, particularly at night. See you again soon.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. I'm Alastair Stewart and we are in the second and final hour of our programme today, keeping you company here on TV and radio on GB News, with plenty more still to come on the programme, including continuing our preview of the budget, which is just over a week away, set to place in 15th of March. We will also be discussing stricter laws announced by the Prime Minister today in a bid to stop people arriving in the UK illegally. All of that and even more. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news on a busy news day. Here once again is Tatiana Sanchez.
Alastair, thank you and good afternoon. It's 2:01. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The former Health Secretary wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off everyone, according to leaked messages sent during the COVID pandemic. The latest WhatsApp conversation, published in the Sunday Telegraph, shows Matt Hancock discussing how to use another strain of the COVID virus to scare the public. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told us Mr Hancock's political career is over.
I think the key thing is that he accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts. Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.
Rail passengers could see their season ticket go up by hundreds of pounds from today in the largest train fare hike for more than a decade. Ticket prices across England and Wales are rising by an average 5.9%, despite strikes and cancellations that have brought parts of the UK to a standstill. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman says the increase is below inflation, but Labour has called it savage. The Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, said it isn't fair with the level of services currently being provided.
A taxpayer who really doesn't want to pay more for what, frankly, is quite a lousy service. We heard last week, for example, that the number of cancellations on the day is at the highest it's ever been since records began. So people are quite frankly thinking, yep, it's we're paying more and we're getting less.
Prince Harry has defended his previous use of drugs, saying some of them helped him mentally. During an interview, he spoke to trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, who diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder. In his memoir, Spare, Harry admitted taking drugs on a regular basis, saying he used marijuana in 2015 whilst living in the grounds of Kensington Palace. COVID vaccine manufacturer Moderna has announced its new base will be built in Oxfordshire. The Moderna Innovation and Technology Centre will be based in Harwell to help develop mRNA vaccines for respiratory diseases, including future variants of COVID. The move is set to create hundreds of jobs in construction, as well as within the manufacturing facility, which is expected to open in 2025. Well, clashes have broken out in Athens between police and demonstrators over a train crash that killed 57 people. Protesters hurled objects, including petrol bombs, while police responded with tear gas and hand grenades. Following protests over the past 3 days, thousands of university students and railway workers took to the streets to voice their anger over safety standards on the rail network. More than 350 people were on board the train when it crashed head-on into a freight train last Tuesday. It's the deadliest train crash in Greece's history, while the government has vowed to investigate and fix the ailing rail networks. Now, more than 100 nations have completed an historic pact to protect the world's oceans. The legally binding High Seas Treaty aims to put 30% of seas into protected areas by 2030. Very little of the high seas is subject to any protection, with pollution and overfishing posing a growing threat. Environmental groups say the agreement will help reverse marine losses and ensure sustainable development. Notorious prisoner Charles Bronson will make another bid to get out of jail this week in a public parole hearing. He's been behind bars for most of the last 50 years for crimes such as hostage-taking and armed robbery. Proceedings will be live-streamed on Wednesday with a final hearing behind closed doors on Friday. He says he wants to be released to enjoy what's left of his life. The Prince's Foundation, founded by the King, has partnered with the luxury fashion brand Chanel to launch an embroidery course for students. 6 university graduates will be selected, receiving bursaries for living costs during the 24-week programme. Held at the King's Highgrove home in Gloucestershire, it aims to equip and prepare aspiring designers. And venues across England and Wales will be open later over the King's coronation weekend in May. Pubs, clubs and bars will serve customers for an extra 2 hours between the 5th and the 7th of May. The Home Secretary says it's so that people can have the time to enjoy an extra pint or two. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. Let's return to our top story now, with the budget just a couple of weeks away before Jeremy Hunt addresses the House of Commons and, of course, the rest of us, because it will be covered live across all broadcasting outlets, I'm sure, including here at GB News with full analysis. It's a major event in the political calendar, but it's also a major event in the economic calendar and has a direct and immediate impact on the economic prospects of the country at large and all of us as individuals. We're mulling over what he may or may not have planned for us to improve the economy and hopefully seek growth. We want to hear from you on what you want and what you fear most, those of you who are on the front line trying to hold a business together or trying to hold your own budgets together, from those who are, of course, the backbone of our economy. What would they do if they were Chancellor? Joining me first is the owner of Hair and Beauty Salon, someone who's been on the programme several times before, so it's always a joy to see her again. That beauty salon is called Serenity Loves, and her name is Jo Bevilacqua, which I got completely wrong first time, but I think I've just about now, at the third time of trying, got it about right. 2 very simple questions. What do you most want to hear Jeremy Hunt say in his budget speech, and what fills you with horror and keeps you awake at night that he might say?
Well, I think the first thing that we would love to hear is more support for people in work as it is, and to help get more people into work. Our industry, in the hair and beauty industry, is one that contributes billions to the economy every single year. But we need more targeted help for sure. We've had multiple people, not just in my business, but up and down the country, who have reduced their hours because actually they're better off. So we need more healthcare with childcare. Obviously, our industry is primarily female-based, but I think this is a national thing that I'm hearing from women all over and families all over the country. We need way more help with childcare. It's just not feasible for a lot of people to go back to work full stop, or go back to work in the capacity that they want to, because they're probably going to be more out of pocket. So that's definitely something that I want to see. I feel like the whole system around childcare and supporting families that want to work is something that needs a massive refocus and relaunch. The thing I don't want to hear is more taxes for small businesses. We have had such a rough ride over the last 3 years. Many are clinging on with our fingertips, trying to hold on to keeping our businesses trading, and growing is just something that I think the government keep talking about. But as small businesses, growth just seems so far off. So for so many of us, it's really still about survival mode. I have a community of thousands of women who have businesses. I speak to people who are men running businesses, and so many have already thrown the towel in or are thinking about throwing the towel in. They're just burnt out, and they are fed up of the uncertainty and just how hard it is to try and achieve something for your clients or your staff or the community as a whole. So yeah, I think more targeted help and less taxes on those people that are trying to create these jobs and create these services that,
Sure.
like you say, are the backbone of our community.
Hairdressers famously are people who your clients confess and bare their souls to when you're sitting there and chat away and what have you. I've got your point on childcare loud and clear, and that is a very strong and powerful argument. How high up the list is income tax and the idea that people that you employ to work in the salon can keep more of what they actually earn? How important is that to your customers and to your staff?
I think it's fundamental at the moment. I feel like people are being hit every time they open their phone or they're looking at their bills or they're leaving the house. That unfortunately inflation has forced all the prices of everything to go up. I think we all feel it when we go and do a food shop or we go and try and have a service or buy a product that we love. So I think keeping more money in the pockets of the people that are working so hard and trying so hard day to day to survive is the answer for me. Unfortunately, hair and beauty is a luxury. So the less disposable income that people have, the less they're going to spend in places like ours, which then means if they're not spending that money, do we have to let people go? Can we not give our staff the wage increases that they so desperately need to provide for their family? It just feels like a bit of a mess at the moment. And us business owners are doing everything we can to do things the right way. In COVID, hair and beauty salons up and down the country did everything they were supposed to do. We came back with split teams. We invested thousands, if not tens of thousands, in PPE. We worked at lesser capacity than what we could have. The demand is there, but we followed government guidance to not work to full capacity, and we're still feeling the effects of that. So yeah, I think having more in the pockets of people to allow them to buy the things that they need to buy, but then also have some disposable income to enjoy their lives and to have some sort of enjoyment in their life and to have the choice of where they want to spend it. And at the end of the day, if you're spending money in your local community, it's always going to be a positive impact.
Absolutely. You've just demonstrated perfectly why it's always such a joy to talk to you. Clear, crisp analysis, and don't disagree with a word that you said there, particularly on disposable income and people making their own choices. Best of luck to you and all who work with you, Joe. Keep in touch with us. You're always welcome on the programme. Joe Bevilacqua there, who runs the Serenity Loves and owns Serenity Loves Beauty Salon, making really good sense on childcare and on income tax. Well, I'm delighted now to move from the small business sector to the big business sector, but to be joined again by another regular who began life as a business owner and co-founder of a new business. It was called Cobra Beer. It is Lord Karen Bilimoria. He is also Vice President of the CBI. Karen, it's always a pleasure to see you. I'm going to start off by waving an article which you may or may not have seen, but for folk at home, if you don't read the Sun newspaper, it's entirely a matter for you, but today's a good day to read it, because there's a bit in it written by Simon Clarke, who is a former Treasury Chief Secretary, i.e. number 2 in the Treasury, who says, right, Brexit's done, now give us a budget to boost Britain. Can Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak do that? Must Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak do that?
Of course they can. So the reality is they're not. The reality is that we have the highest tax burden in 70 years. The reality is that we've just had one of our largest pharmaceutical giants that's headquartered in Cambridge that worked with Oxford University, the AstraZeneca vaccine, deciding to invest hundreds of millions of pounds, not here, but in Ireland, because they have a tax rate of 12.5%. The reality is that we have Arm, a company, a high-tech company that every one of us has their technology in our mobile phones, started in Cambridge, that has decided to list in New York and not in London. That is the reality. We're narrowly avoiding a recession. We have no growth. Our productivity has flatlined, and we are putting up taxes. And the government, I'm afraid to say, is just not listening. And I said to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor from February 2021, I said, Rishi, do not put up taxes. You put up taxes. We don't know when this pandemic's going to end. People are struggling to survive. They need help. And if you put up taxes, it will stifle the recovery and will hamper growth. And what did he do? And what is Jeremy Hunt doing? They just keep putting up taxes to the highest level in 70 years. This is hugely damaging. The corporation tax going up from 19% to 25%. That's massive. I mean, that's almost 1/3 in one swoop. And then you're removing at the same time the super deduction, which is a 130% deduction where you get a deduction from your income tax if you invest in your business. That's being taken away in April. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
This is
Karen, have you seen the report in the papers from the KPMG document suggesting that many multinationals, not least American multinationals, are avoiding the UK not only because of the corporation tax that you've just very eloquently dismantled and underlined the damage of it, but also because of continuing red tape and at government level, quotes, a lack of drive. That's KPMG quoting American companies.
This is what has really worried me. We in Britain, with this tiny country of less than 1% of the world's population, is still the 6th largest economy in the world. We've just been overtaken by India. But we have always been a magnet for inward investment. Historically, we've either been the 2nd or 3rd largest recipient of inward investment in the world. And when we were part of the European Union, we were seen as the gateway into Europe as well, into 27 other countries. Well, we haven't left Europe. We're still part of Europe. We've got to make the most of our biggest trading partner at our doorstep, 45% of our trade. But the good news this last week was the Northern Ireland Protocol being hopefully resolved. Now, I'm just hope that the DUP agree to this and that we can actually get on with something practical to enable Northern Ireland, which was the Achilles heel of Brexit, to be resolved, so we can get on with all the other important things with our biggest trading partner, including Horizon, the collaborative research, including so much more to enhance our trade and business between our biggest trading partner. All that's been held up for 7 years. So the whole world looking in at us. When I travel around the world, Alice, it is actually, I find it very upsetting what people say. What is this great country doing to itself? And we have so much potential. We have a labor shortage. We have over 1 million vacancies. The good news, I believe, at long last, we've been crying out to the government saying, activate the labor shortage occupation list so that we can bring in labor where there are shortages. Hospitality, construction, just about every sector has labor shortages. If the government listens to that, that will help a lot. Getting people back to work, people who have not come back to work after the pandemic, whatever we can do to encourage people to come back to work. Encouraging self-employment, the IRS 35 that was going to be reformed, that is now not going to happen. So we need basic things like that. Encouraging investment in R&D and innovation. We invest 1.7% of GDP. America, Germany invest almost 3%. So that's a whole percentage point more. That's more than £20 billion more per year that we should be investing in R&D and innovation to power ahead our productivity and our growth. These are the sort of things that need to be done.
I asked our mutual friend Anthony Selden a moment ago on the programme if he understood or if he thought anyone understood what it means nowadays to be a fiscal conservative, and he said he rather doubted it. And you remember, I think we talked about it, in the wake of the Liz Truss Kwasi Kwarteng budget, there was a leading article in the Telegraph that said the Tories need to have a fundamental debate about what the Tory approach is to growth, because it's not just going to come along, it does require policy.
Absolutely. And it's the sort of things that I'm talking about, to have a competitive tax system. And by the way, the tax system, not just corporation tax, I've given you one or two other examples, but freezing the tax thresholds means that every individual in this country, their taxes are going up because we've got an inflation environment where inflation has hit 10%, and you've got frozen thresholds. That means you're getting taxed more. It's as simple as that. So everyone is being affected by this. And you can't have an economy growing when people have, I mean, you just heard from your previous interviewee how she said, we're burnt out. I mean, business, how much more can business take? 2 years of a pandemic, 1 year of the Ukraine war that exacerbates everything, creates inflation, creates supply chain issues, creates an energy crisis. How much more can businesses take? And then you whack extra taxes onto business as well. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And then you say we can't afford it. Well, borrowing. If you look at the OBR report, after Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, they had a good plan. They just went about it the wrong way through irrational exuberance. Their plan for growth was absolutely what this country needs, but they didn't do it properly. Afterwards, you had an OBR report with Jeremy Hunt's plan. If you look at that report, do you know what borrowing is going to be? It's still going to be 100% of GDP 5 years down the road.
Karen, we have to leave it there, but thank you as always. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme, and I'm so pleased you're able to hear what Jo was saying from the hairdressing salon just before that, because like you, I thought she was absolutely spot on, as indeed I think you were too. Karen Billimoria, thank you very much indeed. Have a great Sunday afternoon, and I look forward to talking to you again very, very soon. So a great run of guests. If you missed any of them and want to catch up on them, it'll all be on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to @GBNews on YouTube, and you can hear Anthony Selden, you can hear Karen Billimoria there again, and also Jo from the hairdressing salon. Adding to that glitterati of commentators and people kind enough to join me on the programme, delighted to say is another new friend, and that's Kim Conchi. There he is. Kim's the Chief Executive Officer of the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce. What are you picking up from your members? What do they most want Jeremy Hunt to do, and what do they most fear he might do to make things even worse?
Well, good afternoon, Alastair. What we most want is a budget of hope and clarity, really. You heard Lord Kilimoria and Jo therefore say some of the sort of examples of where we can encourage prosperity, jobs, skills development and so on in the private sector. So I don't think it's rocket science. I don't think it's beyond the Chancellor to come up with a series of things which give clarity around what hope, research and development, confidence for small businesses, and investment in the sort of things which are going to encourage the sort of economy which we want in the UK going forward. So what I call good growth, not just any old growth, really. And I think some practical solutions. Childcare, as Jo was saying, is definitely one of them. I'd like to see, we heard murmurs this week about the government being able to do something for energy in homes beyond April. And I would like to see some clarity. I've been going on for a while around businesses that also need some extension to the energy security issue. So I'd like to see something around that. We are lacking in this country at the moment in innovation and the confidence to innovate. And as you heard from Lord Billimoria there, investments going overseas, that is absolutely shameful. We've now told since Brexit that we can control our own destiny, and we've got to make sure that we are doing that with the things which are going to big up our private sector, demonstrate that skills development, jobs, prosperity across the UK with a continued strong levelling up agenda is really going to be part of what this government is going to do. Without that confidence, the regions are really not going to be able to have the sort of security of going forward, that this levelling up actually means anything, that we're going to get the sort of support that will, from the public sector, which will enable entrepreneurs, innovators, and the sort of smaller growing enterprises in these renewable energies and so on, which are so important in Cornwall at the moment, to really give us a chance to prosper. I don't think it's beyond them. I really do agree with Lord Billimore. It's not. It's practiced economic theory plus looking at the circumstances we're in at the moment. We can't ourselves affect the war. So let's concentrate on the things we can affect, and let's have some policies which address those head on.
Because it struck me when I knew that you and I were going to be talking for the first time, and you coming and speaking on behalf of the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce. The West Country generally is an amazing example of a part of the United Kingdom that is absolutely rich in innovation, has a traditional industrial history, mining, all sorts of stuff like that, but embraces the future, one of the most inventive and imaginative in hospitality and tourism, but also spaceports and the rest of it. Men and women are out there who've got great ideas. They just need the government to get out of the way or to get in there and help them more directly.
I think create the atmosphere, create the aura of confidence and hope for this economy that the entrepreneurs can pile into. You've touched on some of the things there. The spaceport is huge for Cornwall. Renewable energy, Cornish lithium. These are things which pick up on Cornwall's rich industrial heritage and turn them into 21st century. We're on the cusp of something really great in Cornwall with those things. I can see lots of innovation trying to happen in, for example, hospitality. It's not just those high-tech businesses where innovation can happen. Hospitality, construction, creative sectors, like, we've got a very powerful sort of software coding and developing cluster in Redruth in Cornwall. So these are the sort of areas which need the government to show that they care about these things and can help put the entrepreneurs who are leading these things onto a world stage. And I'm just not getting that confidence at the moment.
Well,
one or two other things. We need to see some help with housing for workers. That's a big problem in the southwest of England. And as Lord Billimore said, staff shortages. Well, we need to have investment in automation and so on, as well as making sure that in rural places people are having access to the skills development which are going to give them well-paid jobs into the future, because we still have a problem in Cornwall of average wages being less than the national average, and that's not a great message for an area which is rich in innovation.
Forgive me one cheeky comment at the end, and that's the other thing they might do, whether it's Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Hunt, and that is to listen to people like you and Karen and Joe in the hairdressing salon, because it strikes me that folk at the cutting edge, at the front end, at the coalface, do know what's going on and do know what is required. Great to meet you, Kim, and thank you for your time this afternoon. I hope very much indeed we can continue the conversation at some stage in the future. That's Kim Conchie there, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and how well they are served by him. Thank you very much indeed, sir. We've plenty more to come this afternoon on Alastair, Stewart and Friends after the break. GBNews political reporter Olivia Utley will be back here with all of the latest political stories as the government pushes their drive to tackle illegal immigration and people crossing the channel in those small boats like that. We'll be talking to Olivia about that, plus anything else that she's found out while she's been out and about on the phone and chatting to people, because it's what she does and does so brilliantly. But before all of that, let's bring you up to date with what remains of the weekend weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning colder as we move into next week, the increased risk of frost and ice and some snow in the forecast too. Looking at the bigger picture, we can see, yes, it's been relatively cold this weekend for many parts, but from Monday onwards, these darker blues, the colder air filters southwards as we head through the beginning of next week, an increasing risk of snow. And that's also evident as we go through the next 24 hours. So through the rest of Sunday, it is a cloudy picture out there. We do see some showers across parts of Wales, up into Northern Ireland and Scotland, perhaps a little bit wintry over the highest ground. Temperatures overall on the chilly side, 5 to 9 Celsius. So a lot of cloud around. Generally light winds, but starting to come down from the north. Into the evening time, we see an increased risk of snow developing across parts of Aberdeenshire up into Shetland. Stronger winds developing too. So an increased risk of ice here as we move into the early hours. Met Office warnings in force for snow and ice as we move through into Monday morning. Generally across England and Wales, though, temperatures low single figures. A lot of cloud around to start Monday morning with some showers from the word go. We do have a weather front sinking south. It's this band of weak rain here. Behind it, much colder air filtering in. Turning brighter, though, with sunny spells and wintry showers. Some snow starting to accumulate to relatively low levels across parts of Scotland as this weather system sinks south, breaks up into showers across the Midlands. In the far south, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius, but temperatures falling as the day goes on. Struggling to get much above freezing in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland with frequent snow showers, which continues into Monday evening as well. Some frontal linkage across southern parts of Wales, southwest England could see the return of some rain and hill snow later on in the evening. But overall, it looks like over the next few days, it stays rather cloudy in the south, snow showers in the north, staying very cold, particularly at night. See you again soon.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 2:32. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The former Health Secretary wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off the public. That's according to leaked WhatsApp messages sent during the COVID pandemic. The latest WhatsApp conversation published in the Sunday Telegraph shows Matt Hancock discussing how to use another strain of the COVID virus to scare the public. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told GB News Mr Hancock's political career is over.
I think the key thing is that he is accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts. Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.
Rail passengers could see their season ticket go up by hundreds of pounds from today in the largest train fare hike for more than a decade. Ticket prices across England and Wales are rising by an average of 5.9%. That's despite strikes and cancellations that have brought parts of the UK to a standstill. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman says the increase is below inflation, but Labour has called it savage. Clashes have broken out in Athens between police and demonstrators over a train crash that killed 57 people. Thousands of university students and railway workers have taken to the streets to voice their anger over safety standards on the rail network. More than 350 people were on board the train when it crashed head-on into a freight train last Tuesday. It's the deadliest train crash in Greece's history. Its government has vowed to investigate and fix the ailing rail networks. TV, online and DAB plus radio. You're with GB News. Now it's over to Alastair.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. So, she's back, having been on the phone and pottering around. Olivia Utley has joined me again, GB News political correspondent. Delighted to say I've had some lovely conversations since you've been out there doing your thing. And one thing that struck me particularly forcefully with Karen Bilimoria, he of Cobra Beer fame, but also Vice President of the CBI, the Confederation of Beer Industry, is that he agreed absolutely with the criticism that's made by clients that KPMG are quoting this morning. And that is that many investors fear that this is a government that lacks drive. It just hasn't got the woomph factor. Well, and I shared with my guests what I also shared with you, although I know that you've seen it already. Simon Clarke, former number 2 at the Treasury back in the day, saying, right, Brexit's done now, give us a budget to boost Britain. And Karen Bilimoria also said in our conversation that Truss and Kwarteng weren't wrong in that infamous budget. They just got the presentation of it wrong and the briefing of it wrong. Is there still quite a constituency within the Conservative Party, nay, even within the government, for the kind of Truss approach and what Simon's writing about here?
Yeah, there certainly is. And a few weeks ago, we saw the Conservative Coalition for Growth, as they're calling themselves, form. And Simon Clarke is at the head of that. And it's essentially quite a big caucus of Conservative MPs getting themselves together, sort of coalescing together and forming a group of the same sort of model as the ERG. And what they're hoping to do in the lead up to this budget is put lots and lots of pressure on the Prime Minister and Chancellor to enact those sort of pro-growth measures which were in the budget. They feel as though essentially the baby was thrown out with the bathwater when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng left government. It'll be interesting to see how much of an impact that has, because of course we know that the Chancellor has been given more fiscal headroom in this budget by bigger than expected tax receipts over the last few months, and the pressure really is ramping up to enact at least some of these measures. There is a lot of pressure on the Chancellor to delay or scrap the planned rise to corporation tax, which is considered by many Conservatives as a...
Oh, and Bilimoria said absolutely dreadful, and he said that to Rishi's face.
Absolutely, and we've seen the fallout that's already had with AstraZeneca, for example, moving to Ireland rather than setting up new headquarters in Britain. So it'll be interesting to see if Jeremy Hunt budges on that at all. A couple of other measures, the freeze on fuel duty, will he keep that going? He's obviously under pressure on both sides there. But you would have thought that given the slightly easier economic climate than he might have been expecting, we know that inflation is also going down, that now would be the moment to start cutting taxes. But from what we've seen, Jeremy Hunt is pretty reluctant to do that.
How are the backbenchers feeling about what we talked about an hour or so back, and that is big piece in the Sun newspaper and front page of the Mail that Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, are saying we will really stop the talking now and get something done about illegal immigration and people crossing the Channel on a daily basis in small boats. Any pushback against that within the party?
No, I mean, the message is very positive and is being welcomed by pretty much everyone in the Conservative Party. The worry that I'm seeing, which we've seen again and again, is that backbenchers are concerned that the government just won't be able to get this legislation over the line, that if they manage to get through the Commons, which is quite likely, there will be Lords who don't like the sound of it. And then if it gets that far, then, of course, we've got these groups of human rights lawyers who, so far, have managed to pretty much nullify the Rwanda plan. So that's the worry. The worry is that it won't work. But the idea behind
But it would work if there was a British Bill of Rights, and it would work if we withdrew from the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yes, but that is an area where Conservative backbenchers do diverge quite a bit. Of course, there are huge supporters of the British Bill of Rights, but people like Robert Buckland, former Justice Secretary, has big issues with it, and he has his own sort of caucus of like-minded MPs.
And the great Damien Green on this very programme.
Well, absolutely. So there's a bit of divergence there, but the general message of stopping the votes is one that is extremely popular and that backbenchers see could be a really important point of divergence between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer at the next election.
And we are in no doubt at all, because of our people's polls, that out there, whether they are kind enough to be watching us or listening on radio, it's what the overwhelming majority of GB News viewers and listeners think as well. Get it done.
Absolutely, exactly.
Olivia, always a great pleasure. Thank you for breaking into your weekend to do another shift. See, hard-working, that great British approach to life. Thank you very much indeed. Have a lovely evening. Thank you very much indeed. So that's Olivia Utley there, GB News political correspondent, with her views on the budget and on Suella Braverman and the promise of legislation to curb small boats crossing the English Channel. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and Radio, with more still to come this afternoon before we slip elegantly off air. And as you heard in the news bulletin, train fares are indeed set to rise in England and Wales by 5.9%. But what will this mean for services and passengers? And it's not just season tickets, it's individual tickets as well. That's coming up next, but first, a quick break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and Radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Well, from today, millions of us, and I say that with pain in my heart, will be facing the prospects of paying more for our train tickets as the government introduces the biggest annual price hike in over a decade. Regulated fares in England, which include season tickets and off-peak tickets, will cost 5.9% more in the coming year. But the government says that they are shielding passengers for even higher prices. From Nottingham, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Please stand well clear of the edge of platform 3.
Rail fares are heading in one direction, up. A 5.9% increase awaits passengers buying tickets from today. It's the biggest rise in a decade. At a time when purses are being squeezed to pulp, it's a hard reality to swallow.
You kind of reconsider using an alternative such as like a bus or, like other different transport than getting on the train.
It does put me off a bit. I'd probably, since the existing price rises over the last 3 or 4 years, have already done that anyway.
Every single year it's gone up, and this is the biggest increase, but now I think it's gone too far. It's getting too high.
The Department for Transport sets fares for a number of regulated tickets, including season and off-peak. A season ticket from Nottingham to London for 5 days costs over £10,000 a year. But from today, that ticket will rise by more than £600. Usually, fares go up by July's Retail Prices Index measure of inflation. Last year, it was 12.3%. The government says it's shielding passengers from the brunt of the costs by keeping the rise closer to 6%. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman said, "I understand it has been a difficult year and people are feeling the pinch, which is why, through the biggest ever government intervention, we capped the rise well below inflation and delayed it coming into force." It's been a rough time on the railways. From strikes to the pandemic, subsidies have kept trains running to the tune of £31 billion.
Well, no one likes prices going up for anything, and it's certainly no different when it comes to rail fares.
Mike Hewitson is head of policy at Transport Focus. The independent watchdog says passenger confidence is suffering.
It's hard for people to accept having to pay more if they're not getting more in return. Paying more for an unreliable service isn't good. So I think the important thing for the railways, if passengers are going to have to pay more, that they get a better service in return. And by that, I mean a service they can depend on.
While the fare cap only applies to some tickets, rail operators tend to follow the trend. When all prices seem high, hiding is wiser than standing out for the wrong reason. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, there you have it, the background to it and the picture coming out of Nottingham. I'm delighted to be joined now by Lisa Minnow, who is the travel editor at the Sun newspaper. And just to underline one thing that was made very clear in that report, but it's so important, this is a government decision. This isn't the train operating companies or Network Rail desperately trying to make up some of the millions that they've lost as a result of strike after strike after strike. Mr. Merriman, the minister there, at least has the courage to go on the record and say, no, this is my decision.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it was obviously a very good decision. We could have been faced with far higher increases. Normally, the fares, regulated fares, go up by the retail price index from the previous July. Now, that was running at 12.3% last July. And that would have been a huge shock to the system for people. So this is a huge intervention the government have made to ensure that fares don't go up by as much. But as everyone has said, with the pretty poor service that we've been having I'm a regular train commuter, the pretty poor service we've been having over the last few months, you really do find it very difficult to justify even that increase.
I totally agree with you, and I put my cards on the table as well. I too am a regular commuter, or at least I am when I can do. I lost several days' work during the strikes as well. So there you go. Labour say it's savage. I'm going to float another word. I think it's stupid when you've had all these strikes and general conditions of the services up and down the country are simply not what they should be. To raise prices in these conditions is hardly going to attract anybody back onto the railway.
That is a very good point. Yes, of course, it isn't going to encourage people to go back on the rails when it is so much more expensive. And especially when you think of the fact that people's habits have changed throughout the pandemic. They don't need to perhaps get that peak time train anymore. They can do a Zoom call or change the days they're working altogether. But that's part of the problem. We've got far less people using the railways than did before the pandemic. And so what has to happen now is that the government and the rail companies have to look at tempting a different type of traveller onto the railways. as you say. Is a different type of traveller going to be tempted onto the railways when they see the kind of price rises that they have? But something has to be done, because the finances of the rail industry as a whole are in an awful state, as we know now, because, of course, it's the taxpayer that's actually, bolstering the revenue by, billions in terms of trying to get that privatisation and nationalisation system that we've got at the moment to try to work for the travelling public.
Sure. And it's interesting to note that if you take a service that does actually work and do a good job, like the Heathrow Express out of Paddington, which is, in my humble opinion, reasonably priced with good trains, like the Javelin ones going down into Kent, then customers will use it and customers will embrace it.
Well, that's right, yes. And this is where the crux is. We've got to invest in our railways. We've got one of the oldest railway systems in the world, but on top of that, not a huge amount of investment has been put into it over the years. And there's decades worth of investment that needs to be put into them to get the services far more reliable, so that people are actually able to rely on the railway system and use it and feel they can use it without worrying about ever getting to their point of destination.
Quite so. Lisa, great to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for breaking into your afternoon to talk to us. That's Lisa Minow, who is the travel editor at the Sun newspaper, with her thoughts and reflections on that 5.9% increase in most rail fares. Now, talking of which, the cost of living crisis is here for the long haul, and households up and down the country are still struggling to make ends meet. But also, many are concerned about money management and are failing to put money aside and to save, not just for pensions, but also for when shocks arrive. It may be your next railway season ticket. A new study from the financial budgeting platform Hyperjar reveals that almost 1 in 6 British parents are concerned about their children's money management skills as households continue to grapple with the cost of living crisis. Matt Maggans joins me live now to discuss all of that. He's a personal finance expert and founder of the money management platform Hyperjar. And there he is with his brilliant daughter as well. Hello and welcome to both of you. So is it a question that children don't know how to manage their own money, whatever you and I are good enough to give them as pocket money or earnings or whatever, or that they just don't get the concept of budgeting, period, full stop?
I think it's a combination. So in this day and age, especially with social media, there's all this temptation to buy things, to purchase things. But as money has become more digital, it's also hard to understand for a child what money actually is, and that it has, scarcity. Your money will disappear at some point if you spend it all. So for children, trying to connect the fact that this money has a limited supply, you have to do stuff to earn more of it. And when you spend it, better be careful about how you spend it, because once it's gone, it's gone. So it's all those things combined, just teaching kids, use this money because it gives you things, but once you use it, it's gone. So think carefully about how you spend that.
Your lovely daughter is hanging on your every word. Marilyn, have you tried the app yourself? And I know quite rightly you will say what a brilliant person your daddy is, and I'm sure your mummy is as well. But what did you learn from the app that will help you?
So you should not spend your money every day, so you don't have more money any money left. You should keep it so you can get lots of money.
Well, I think that's very sound advice as well. Matthew, was it the fact that you're a dad that inspired you to create the app? Give me a quick thumbnail sketch of what else the app does beyond what your lovely daughter just described.
So I think the child part of it was almost a side effect of what we built. The main thing, the reason why I was inspired to build Hyperjar was, especially a few years ago, a lack of savings options for the average British consumer, especially when interest rates were 0%, yet lots of options to go into debts or to spend money. So originally it was a tool to try and help people spend more thoughtfully. And then as we thought about that, I realized that half of my spending is involving children. So to give children a similar tool, and all the basic lessons of money management that adults use, children can use and learn. So it just became, it sort of evolved into what it is today. But basically it's trying to help people spend their money better and not be so impulsive and hopefully not get into debt.
Which is crucial in the cost of living crisis, not getting into debt. Do you give guidance to people if they do face consumption patterns beyond what they're used to? What are good sources of credit and what are dangerous and very expensive sources of credit? Do you go into that sort of stuff as well?
So we don't provide any official financial advice. We're definitely not licensed to do that. However, we do, with social media and with blog posts, we give topics about different types of debt or different types of behavioral patterns where you may be impulsive. So it's more trying to give people a framework to incentivize that savings and make it easy and fun. But beyond that, we advise people to speak to an expert or speak to a close friend or family if you're having any kind of specific trouble with debt, for example.
How worried are you, or how optimistic, let's be positive as well, because it may be that, about the forthcoming budget?
It's been quite tricky these days to try and guess what will happen, what will not happen. I guess I'm optimistic that as a nation, because there's been a lot of difficulty recently, that we're going to have some measures to try and help the average consumer in this country. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful there'll be measures to try and help people keep more of their money, help their money go further for the basic necessities, so that people can also look beyond that, enjoy life. So I said I'm hopeful, but I do think the next year will be a tough year, and people will have to individually try to really crack down, because there's no easy solutions to what we're facing right now.
Sure. There's also a briefing in one or two of the papers this morning that the Chancellor may tinker with premium bonds and national savings. Is that the best place if a child has a little bit of money, whether it's Christmas money or pocket money or whatever? Is that still a good product?
I think it's maybe nice for a small portion of a child's savings. Sure. But with interest rates now, there are almost better options in terms of just fixed interest rate bonds, but also for a child to learn about markets, to have some amount in some kind of market instrument, just to learn about how things work. But then I think the bulk of the money should be more in a fixed rate bond, because just interest rates are so high these days that
absolutely.
Yeah.
Matthew, we have to leave it there. I'm sorry. My thanks to both of you, and lovely to meet both of you. That's Matthew Meggins and his lovely daughter. Matthew is the founder of the money management app Hyperjar. Give it a look, give it a whirl. And as he said, it's not only for little people, it's for big people like us as well. That, alas, is all that we have time for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will be back next weekend from midday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and from all of us here at GB News for now, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye. Here's the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning colder as we move into next week, the increased risk of frost and ice, and some snow in the forecast too. Looking at the bigger picture, we can see, yes, it's been relatively cold this weekend for many parts, but from Monday onwards, these darker blues, the colder air filters southwards as we head through the beginning of next week, an increasing risk of snow. And that's also evident as we go through the next 24 hours. So through the rest of Sunday, it is a cloudy picture out there. We do see some showers across parts of Wales, up into Northern Ireland and Scotland, perhaps a little bit wintry over the highest ground. Temperatures overall on the chilly side, 5 to 9 Celsius. So a lot of cloud around. Generally light winds, but starting to come down from the north. Into the evening time, we see an increased risk of snow developing across parts of Aberdeenshire up into Shetland. Stronger winds developing too. So an increased risk of ice here as we move into the early hours. Met Office warnings in force for snow and ice as we move through into Monday morning. Generally across England and Wales, though, temperatures low single figures. A lot of cloud around to start Monday morning, with some showers from the word go. We do have a weather front sinking south. It's this band of weak rain here. Behind it, much colder air filtering in. Turning brighter, though, with sunny spells and wintry showers. Some snow starting to accumulate to relatively low levels across parts of Scotland as this weather system sinks south, breaks up into showers across the Midlands. In the far south, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius, but temperatures falling as the day goes on. Struggling to get much above freezing in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland, with frequent snow showers, which continues into Monday evening as well. Some frontal linkage across southern parts of Wales, southwest England England could see the return of some rain and hill snow later on in the evening. But overall, it looks like over the next few days, it stays rather cloudy in the south, snow showers in the north, staying very cold, particularly at night. See you again soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who